Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Making Strides podcast. Here with my co-host Adam Short. How you doing, Adam?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, pretty good. Hey, today we're talking about strength training again. This is part two. I think it will make it three episodes. I think is kind of
Right.
what we've
I think
decided
that's the
right
plan.
now.
Yeah.
Um, and we'll recap the first episode real quick. And so Adam, you want to tell us a little bit about what we talked about last time?
Yeah, we hit on what strength training is, kind of how we define that, and maybe even more importantly, what things aren't strength training, especially as a program progresses over time. Um, we talked about the kind of the injury risk kind of ideology around strength training, or reducing that risk, that is. I distinctly remember grandma exercises being talked
Yep.
about. Anything else comes to mind off the top of your head?
Yeah. What variables you should manipulate for continued progress to keep exercises actually inducing strength gains, how strong you need to be, like how far do we take this? We talked about the benefits of strength training for runners, those types of things. So yeah, it was a great it'll be a great resource for folks, as we hope all three of these episodes will be. Today being another more structured episode where we're going to cover things pertaining to exercise selection and programming considerations. So basically just like planning and executing kind of considerations. And then next episode, I think we're going to just basically take the most prevalent questions and just take questions from whoever regarding any kind of nuances or subtopics or areas of just the strength training for runners realm that we haven't kind of talked about yet and we think are important. So if you listen to this and we haven't recorded the next episode yet, just as soon as you can, send us those questions and we'll try to include all the good ones. So yeah.
Yeah, and just a quick word, if you want to verbally ask the question, we have on each of our websites, you can record your question, it'll get sent to us, and it can be a part of the next episode. Super cool.
Yeah, if you want to hear your own voice on our podcast, it's called SpeakPipe. Yeah, and so we'll put the link in the show notes, but you can kind of leave us a voicemail that we can, it's much more fun doing it that way. So we can insert a voicemail into the episode, listen to it live and answer it. So sweet. So yeah, we're going to start off just basically talking about exercise selection. Do you think that we should start with exercise selection or programming considerations, Adam?
I kind of think the considerations first.
Okay.
Just talk a little bit kind of bigger picture, kind of what we're doing, where we're placing things, and then get a little bit more specific about the exercises, some different types of exercises, etc.
Cool. Perfect. So yeah, I mean, where do we want to start here? What do you feel like, Adam, is the most common question you get regarding strength training programming?
When should I do it? Or when should I start?
When should I start? Yes. Okay. Well, my computer's trying to update. Hopefully it doesn't. Okay. Yeah. So time of year, I'm guessing, is what we're talking about.
Yeah, time of year. Yeah, usually they're like, oh, I signed up for this race and, it is now like, should I wait to start, doing a program, a little bit close to the race, or should I start now? And, let's get your thoughts first, like in that kind of context.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time specificity closer to a race and then working on other things that we need to work on that aren't as specific to the event is it is I think really that key that concept holds a lot of value with all these different aspects of training, but it also with strength training. So we definitely want to be incorporating and starting strength training as soon as possible. These benefits take a while to kind of take effect. And also, on top of that, I think that the type of strength training that you can do the farthest from the race would potentially be the most effective strength training, before the intensity and volume of your running, is a lot higher, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But anyway, so basically, just to review my thoughts there for a second, I think that as soon as possible and as far out from the race as possible, typically I really, really, really encourage people during their off season. And, here in Colorado, I mean, or maybe even most places, it's like your last big race of the year is maybe like September or maybe October or something like that. But then right after that, you kind of start hitting the gym pretty hard for the next couple of months. In that period of time being a really good opportunity for building a ton of strength. Whereas then maybe after that, as training picks up, we may make some changes to the strength training. But anyway, Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, a lot of the same things. I get a lot of people like, oh, they want to start a strength training plan, and they're like 12 weeks out from the race. And it's like, yeah, absolutely, let's do that. But the most ideal time would have been, starting 6 months prior, being, like you said, as far away from the race as possible, so we can really prioritize that strength training and not have it be so potentially interfering with the specific run training that you're doing for that event.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we touched on last time, some people just don't do as well as others with strength training, training concurrently, strength and endurance. So the recovery burden, from each person to person is just going to be based on a bunch of different variables, a lot that we really don't have to go into. But there's no better time to start experimenting, adding strength training in than, with a lot of time for that experimentation. So
Yeah.
And if you start strength training and you're doing it somewhat sensibly and conservatively, and you're having issues with either soreness or discomfort or fatigue or anything like that, then maybe, and you are like training for an upcoming race, maybe it isn't a good time to incorporate that strength training. Maybe we wait for a better opportunity.
Absolutely.
I mean, these gains are not like going to make it or break it for you, and they do take time. And so someone could very, very well not sabotage their training, but I guess they could, but have suboptimal training because of certain strength training decisions at the wrong time. So especially if a professional is not helping you, maybe just kind of hold off for a better opportunity.
Yeah, because the closer you get to the event, the more calculated you have to be and the less room for error there is. And so if you haven't done it in a while, or you're just kind of green to it, it's very easy to do a little too much, go a little too hard, especially early on.
Yeah, absolutely. So then I kind of hinted at this already, but so Adam, how do you see coming out of how might somebody's strength training change in their off season to like the first part of their season buildup?
Yeah, so if we're out of season, we're going to really prioritize it and try to push the needle of that strength and that power. And we might look at doing at least two, preferably probably 3 times a week, moving some heavy weight around. And then as we get close to an event, maybe we start that more specific build. We're down to 2 times. And then if you're in any, big week, maybe you go down to once and then kind of resume the 2, or just a big block or something. And then as you get maybe within 4 to 6 weeks, I think it kind of depends on what event you're training for, what your training volume is, what kind of time you have available. But in that kind of period where you're maybe in that 4 to 6 week window out, down to once a week. And then the last couple of weeks, usually I'm not having anybody do any lifting. It's just the running.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think once again, it just depends on the person and stuff, but yeah, I think, in the off season, and I'm kind of transitioning out of my off season lifting right now and more into a preseason lifting. And so I guess what that looks like for me is, yeah, like I mean, I'm already constrained with my schedule, as many normal working adults who like to run are. And so I really can't get more than 2 lifts in per week. So I'll continue to do 2 lifts per week, but I'm just reducing the volume that I'm doing. And so what that means for me is throughout, as a good strength training program would, throughout the strength training program over the winter, I had been, upping the intensity, dropping the reps per set, and potentially increasing the number of sets. But now I'm going to maintain that level of intensity and drop the number of sets, potentially the number of exercises per workout and stuff like that. And so, I mean, that's kind of the transition that we'll see. We do typically see people make the mistake of dropping their intensity, and actually sometimes, I don't know, inadvertently increasing their volume of strength training when they do start running more. And that is something that we definitely don't recommend, and will result in a loss of strength gains. So what this may look like is somebody, instead of doing their, like, that maybe they're doing like some super textbook strength workout, like five sets of 5 squats and deadlifts and stuff like that. Pretty high intensity, high level of fatigue, near failure kind of lifting. And then they build all that strength, and then they'll transition to, oh, my running's increasing, so I'm just going to start doing like planks and single leg squats and like clamshells and lateral band walks, and maybe like, rapid fire high volume step ups and reverse lunges or something like that. Those types of exercises will result, coming from where that person is coming from, will result in a loss of their strength. Whereas there's good research to support the fact that they can instead drop their volume and maintain their intensity of lifting. So continue lifting heavy, continue lifting, lower repetition sets to near fatigue, high fatigue, near failure kind of lifting, and maintain their strength gains. And so I tell folks coming out of the winter, I'm like, look, you built all of this strength. Our goal is to maintain it as best as we can until your next big lifting block, which may not be for like 9 months or more or whatever. And so it helps save time too. That those types of workouts just don't take up as much time. So it allows for a little bit more running, What are your thoughts on all that, Adam?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, a lot of runners, and I think it's becoming slightly less common, but there's still a lot doing, it's like, okay, I'm running, so I need to build my endurance. So therefore I need to be doing sets of like 15 and 20 reps, and maybe just doing body weight. Maybe it's just really light weights. And that's ultimately just going to make you more tired. It's just a lot of volume on a lot of run volume. We need to almost go to the other side of the intensity spectrum and hit a very different stimulus to yield an adaptation is going to be beneficial and complementary to that running.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was in college, and I actually started to lose, I was a gym rat for years, and I started to lose a lot of interest in being in the gym. And the university gym was like in the basement of the rec center. And so I was just like, I need to be outdoors. I was competitive Olympic lifting, so I was down there a lot, and I wanted to do, keep up with the rest of my lifting, like bench pressing and pull-ups and all that stuff. So I had, I was an exercise science student, so we had been learning about single sets. And so, yeah, there's some good research that even suggests that with a single set to failure, you can maintain strength in once a week. Single set to failure, you can maintain your strength. So, I mean, I would go in there, and in like 20 minutes, I would hit all the muscle groups I wanted to hit, and then just leave. And so it worked. I mean, I was lifting pretty much the same, every week, and for months, and it worked for me. And maybe I think that is an approach that works with more seasoned people who are a little bit more seasoned with strength training and know they can consistently, safely go to failure. But anyway, Just if anything, it's a testament to the fact that like it's the volume that's a little bit, that's the time consuming aspect, the muscle damage, soreness kind of aspect, the fatigue, the lingering fatigue, the metabolic stress. A lot of that is all coming mainly from the volume. Volume, once again, just defining that for folks, like volume just being the amount, the total sum amount of lifting that you're doing. Which obviously is like how many times per week, how many exercises each time you go, how many sets and reps each time you go, all of that adds up. So how many like reps per week are you doing, kind of thing. Anyway, where do we want to go from here?
Yeah. So you mentioned kind of that volume and even like not just in a specific session, but kind of over the course of the week. Do we want to talk about kind of frequency a little bit more? Like what do we need to hit in order to make change versus, and I guess you already kind of did mention that with the once a week, but maybe just being deliberate for people, what we need to be hitting at least to make change versus maintenance versus at what point are we not doing that anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. And you had kind of mentioned too, like, 2 to 3 times a week for off season, and then 0 to 2 times per week in season. Right. And yeah, and I think that from a maintenance perspective, like a single, if the intensity and fatigue is there, then a single set is enough to maintain strength. And but I think more realistically speaking, at least 2 sets per exercise, especially with some of these, it's like you got to warm up a bit and to actually like I don't even feel like I can get to my true intensity that I want to work at in my first like 2 or 3 sets, depending on the exercise, especially if it's like a squat or a deadlift. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, similar to when we do like an interval workout, like that first 1 or 2 intervals, like never feel very good. And then you kind of find your groove and find that pattern and you kind of get into it and you're able to close, even harder for probably a multitude of reasons, but then where you started that and feel not much worse.
Yeah, absolutely. So that being, so frequency per week wise,
yeah,
it's just going to depend.
Yeah, classic.
Yep. But most people, most of the time, do pretty well twice a week. Now, to clarify, is this twice a week in general strength training or twice a week per exercise or muscle group?
That's a good question. I would say more of the latter. I don't always, at least with me, it's not always the same exercises, but I'm hitting that muscle group twice.
Yeah. So one of my favorite ways, and we'll get into this, it's a combination of programming considerations and exercise selection. But I mean, one of my favorite kind of, and probably the most common way I'm programming strength for folks and for myself is there's 2 different workouts, and each workout has like a big barbell compound lift. So like maybe one day is a squat, one day is a deadlift, double leg barbell, 1 big lift. And then let's say on the big squat day, they are doing a single leg version of the opposite exercise. So, right, like if we have squat and deadlift, so then on your squat day, it's double leg squat and a single leg deadlift. Right. And then on the other day, it's a double leg barbell, RDL or conventional deadlift, and then it's some sort of single leg squatting exercise, whether that's like a lunge or a Bulgarian or something like that. And so that way we are getting different stimuli, but to the similar muscles on different days, right? And so there is still stress being applied to each muscle group twice in the week, but in the form of different exercises with slightly different goals. So, I mean, you can kind of do both, right? You can do different exercises, but hit similar areas in different ways on different days and just get better diversity in your strength training. So I don't know, everybody does it a little bit differently, but I guess that's, something that I definitely like. I
Yeah,
don't know if you have any
definitely.
thoughts
I've
there.
programmed a lot of stuff like that. I would say I tend to go more towards like, so that's like kind of just your general runner, no issues going on.
Mhm.
I'd say I go a little bit more specific and consistent with the exercises if there is some sort of niggle or something we want to load very specifically. That way we can
Absolutely.
really monitor the training loads and the progression very closely from week to week. Again, if there's something a little bit more specific going on, we want to target.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, we're both PTs too. So like not that, and I don't advocate for somebody who's not a health professional trying to rehab athletes' injuries, because we see that way too much. But yeah, if somebody does have something going on and we're looking for more of a rehab stimulus, I definitely think that having a higher frequency, really getting 3 days a week, specifically loading that area is going to be much, much more optimal um, than these other programming considerations that we're talking about just for general strength.
Yeah.
And then the
Um,
calf, I actually do hit the calf, and the calf, I mean, you can get kind of creative with the calf, but when it comes especially to the soleus and the calf, like, I think we should just be hitting the calf like every time. So that you can't get too creative with, I don't think, or you can, but there may not be a need for that.
yeah, for sure. Um, so something else, similar to when we look at how many variations of a squat there are, how many variations of a deadlift or planks or, whatever, something else I'm talking to with people is, especially if I'm not going to be working with them in person, what resources do you have available? Because that's going to determine, how heavy we can go, how creative we have to be in order to provide a stimulus that will yield an adaptation.
Yeah, like you're saying if somebody doesn't have a gym or weights or something like
Yeah,
that.
like all they
Yeah.
have is like a 2-pound dumbbell and a couple TheraBands.
Yeah, I mean, first I'll mention that like everybody's got a gym near them that's $40 a month or less. Everybody, almost everybody. And so I think that if you're in the off season and this is something you want to take somewhat seriously, just go, do a couple months at the gym. So that's one thing. The second thing is I think that, I got really, I was forced to be really creative with all of my athletes and patients during the COVID lockdown period. And so when, weights were flying off the shelves and price gouged and, you know, I was basically telling people to go to Home Depot and buy cinder blocks for $2.50 for a 36-pound cinder block. So plenty of other people were very, very, surprised to find that they can load a backpack up with household items, equating to 20 or 30 or even 40 pounds pretty easily. Things like Nalgene bottles full of water, canned goods, children, stuff like that. So it's more, I think, it is a valid concern, but it is an easily kind of solved issue with some creative reasoning.
Yep.
Now, obviously, these people, you just can't deadlift. You can't work up to deadlifting 1.5, 2 times your body weight or whatever you want to do to get max strength gains or anything like that. But is that completely necessary? No. Is it fun and like helpful if you do have access to something like that? Yeah, of course. But people in those situations, you just can't, you just don't do it.
Yep. You work around it.
Yeah. I mean, do you have any other thoughts there?
Not really, just wanting to highlight that, there are a lot of options, even when resources are limited. We just have to be a little bit more creative with them. And I love that you mentioned kids. I just saw a guy a couple of days ago, and we were doing some farmer marches, and I threw some weight out, just kind of like, I think this is gonna be about right for you. And turned out it was. So I was like, okay, what do you have available at home that is close to this? Just so happens his son is like within 5 pounds of it. It's like, okay, good. You're gonna have him curl up in a little ball and just like wrap your arm in there. Just carry him along for whatever we prescribed. So
Yep.
good and fun.
Yep. Absolutely. It seems like I hear from my patients and athletes all the time anyway, that when they're doing their strength training, their kids want to be involved, and almost like in like an annoying way. So it's like anytime you can get them involved, that most people say that their kids love it. So
Yeah. And what
anyway.
better way to, engender health and wellness for them too. Just having them be
Yeah.
a part of the process.
Absolutely. Yeah, so just moving things along, I guess. What topic do we want to kind of skirt to next?
I think it'd be important to talk about where to place this in your week in terms of on an easy day, hard day, and then maybe we jump to kind of more the exercise selection.
Yeah, cool. So Adam, so the rest of my week. So I have a threshold workout tomorrow. So probably like 3x12 minutes, RPE 8, probably like an hour and 15, hour and 20-minute hard workout. And then the next day is like some easy running, probably an hour, and then a rest day, and then a long run, like 4.5 hours. So when in the next, if I need to strength train between now and Sunday, so today's Thursday, no, is today Wednesday? What's today?
Today's Thursday.
Today's Thursday. So between Thursday and Saturday, I guess, when should I be strength training, you think? What are your considerations for me?
Okay, so today was easy.
Today was easy. Tomorrow's threshold.
Tomorrow's threshold.
Workout.
Then you're off. No, you're
Then
off.
it's an easy day.
Easy day. Off on
Easy
Sunday.
hour, and then off on Sunday. And then
long run Monday.
Yeah. So like, what are my options?
So I used for a long time, I did all my strength training on hard days with the ideology of hard days being hard. And so I do everything hard on that hard day. And then easy days were just like an easy run off, biked, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I think that can work. That's a viable option, works for a long time.
Yeah. I hear about that a lot from folks.
Yeah. I just, over time, like if you really are, especially in a part of the year where you're pushing that strength piece, it becomes a lot to recover from. And especially if so this was like when I was in school, first got out of school, like I really had kind of Tuesday and Thursday to get this stuff in, a hard session and a lift. So I only had 48 hours or 48 hours to recover from that on Tuesday to then go again on Thursday. And that just wasn't enough time to bounce back. So I've since shifted in the last few years and do all my lifting on easy days and really try to spread it out. And I think what we have to remember there is that this strength piece is a supplement. It's complementary to your running. So we're only dosing this enough to get the adaptation to facilitate our running. And it shouldn't be taken away from it. We should recover enough that we can still nail it on the hard sessions. Now, we won't do that every time. We're not perfect. And kind of our perfect target is moving every day based on what our training volume is, how we've been sleeping, what our overall stress kind of is from other factors of life. But I've really since enjoyed that a lot better, where I've kind of spread out the workload a little more. And it's a lot easier to get in a lift after or on a day you're running easy than it is on coming back from a hard day or thinking about, or a hard effort, or thinking about doing your lift and like, oh, I have this hard effort later. I don't want to like push it too much in this strength session because I want to reserve, or just being smoked from that hard session and you don't have enough to really push it in the strength stuff. So that's kind of my thoughts there, and what I do with myself and my athletes now, unless their schedules dictate otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I could tell you right now, like if I do a hard workout and then I usually don't do strength the same day, because like I'll go to the clinic after my run and I'm working with patients and just demonstrating like a heel raise. I'm like, wow, my calves are toast. Like there's no way I'd be able to like do my normal calf strength training exercise right now. There's just no way, or even a couple hours later or whatever. So, I've never done my strength on my hard workout days just because I physically can't. I feel like I'm asking myself, which of these do I want to be a suboptimal workout? Do I want my speed work to be suboptimal, or do I want my strength training to be suboptimal? Because whichever one comes second is going to be suboptimal. Once again, everybody's different, but that's me. So I always do all my strength training on easy days or rest days. I know there's a camp out there that's like, oh my God, you can't, like a rest day with strength is not rest. And I'm like, yeah, it is. It's rest from running. It's rest from running. And I mean, yeah, so that's a whole nother, yes, it's still stress to your muscles and all
Yeah.
this other stuff, but that's what works for my schedule mainly. Like I just I don't have time in my day being a business owner and a father and husband and all these things to sometimes do a run and a lift on the same day. So it has to be, the only other option is really on my shorter run days or my recovery days, my rest days. So now what's optimal versus what works, those don't always line up exactly, the same. So yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel better like the next day after strength training, even though I went in like a touch
Yeah.
sore or tired from the workout the day before. So, it's
Yeah.
whatever.
So I'll tell you what I am doing with the next couple of days is my strength is tonight. So I had my easy day today. I have strength training. I have time for strength training tonight. I have my hard workout tomorrow. And then on Saturday, it just so happens that this week, that's when my two strength training days are, had Thursday and Saturday. So Saturday, I have another easy hour and I'll also do strength. Sunday, full recovery, doing nothing. Sunday, long run. Now, if I lift a little too heavy or do something new, usually like that 2 days out from my long run, I will be sore on my long run. So that's not ideal. So I try to keep things that are new and like bumps in intensity and stuff like that to a minimum if I know that I have, something like that coming up. So
Yeah. I just started talking. I totally forgot to answer your question.
that's okay. You could have literally said anything. I think the only not super sensible thing to do would be like
Lift on
lift the
Sunday.
same day as the long run.
Oh, yeah.
I think you could lift Sunday. I've lifted the day before long runs, but 4.5 hours is particularly long. So I don't think that would be super smart to lift on Sunday. But you could, if you had tried something like that before and you weren't doing anything different with your strength training. So it just depends. But I think what I have planned, which just so happens to be what works for my schedule, I think that does probably work best.
Nice.
Anyway, so cool. So I mean, what exercises are best for runners then, Adam? What are your three? No, what is your
The three
favorite?
best exercises every
No.
runner
Let's
should
just
do.
do no. That's too cliche, Instagram cliche. Let's do what is your favorite? Start with your least favorite. What is your least favorite exercise that you see lots of runners doing? And then what's your favorite exercise that you like for runners?
Least favorite.
We didn't plan this. I'm just asking him on the
Yeah.
spot for everybody listening.
I have one that's in mind, but I'm trying to think if there's something else that when I see it, I'm like, oh, what is this? But we'll just go with the first one. It'd have to be a clamshell. And it gets us so much bad press, and it is so appropriate at the right time. Like we mentioned last time, there is a time or place for those low level exercises, but I just don't know that there's a lot of carryover from a clamshell to your running.
Yeah, I know. What about your favorite? What's your favorite exercise?
Favorite is probably a probably a step down or step up or some variation like that.
How high
Um,
is your step?
roughly 8 inches. And I also like to include a march with that. So just
Yep.
make it a little bit more run specific and challenge that balance just a smidge more.
Cool. Perfect. Yeah. I just wanted to get you to put the height on record because Adam is not 3 foot tall, everybody. So he is not doing a a glute emphasized step up. I feel like that's what I was trying to that's what I'm trying to convey here is that like I feel like a lot of people are doing step ups, but they're like glutes and it has to be this
Yeah.
really high step up.
And like
And
a
so
12, 20 inch box.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Which does get a ton of glute activation. But maybe we'll touch on this in a minute, but I don't think that's super important, nor is it very specific, even for these, mountain trail runners who are running straight up a mountain. They are never stepping up that high or very, very, very rarely. So it does not have very good carryover. But a 8 inch, yeah, I tell folks 8 to 12 inches, don't go over 12 inches. Like, and if it's a short person doing 12 inches, sometimes I say like, yeah, do less. So, and then also obviously I see people with their like helping way too much with that back leg too. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's the front leg kind of, yeah. Anyway, we can get really specific here, but um, I guess my least,
So what are yours?
yeah, my least favorite, because I mean, obviously there's exercises in the camp that you're talking about where it's just like the intensity's not there, like a clamshell or something banded or something like monster walks or, I don't know. They all have their place. But man, like I think more from the principle, I hate this exercise, the principle of it. But like super, I don't know, just hip thrusters, like glute hip thrusters. I just think they get on my nerves. I just feel like people are doing them because they are obsessed with the glutes and they think that the glutes are the most important, like glute max is the most important muscle and they need to just tear it apart. And so so not only is it not the most effective exercise at recruiting glute max, it's up there, but it's not the best. Not only that, not only is it not like there's almost no creative way to do it at home if you're limited in the amount of weight that you can put on your hips. And just the fact that the glute max is nothing special for a runner. All those things just, I see it so much and people just, there's like, I don't even know. It's almost like there's a Bible for the glute max and like these double legged, super heavy glute hip thrusters. I don't know. I have no clue.
Yeah, I will. And maybe we should, that's a good thing to bring up because, I think anybody listening to this podcast knows we're talking about distance running and they are probably distance runners, in which case this is all very relevant, very much
Yeah,
need
as
to
opposed
know.
to sprinting. Yes, totally.
Yeah, because in sprinting, there is some evidence that like a heavy hip thrust is better than like a heavy squat
Absolutely.
because it's more of that horizontal movement as opposed to a vertical one. But in distance running, I don't understand that to be true or have any carryover from the sprinting world.
Yeah, to quote Chris Johnson when we went to his course, um, he had said verbatim, "You could anesthetize my glutes, and it wouldn't change my conversation pace running." So that's okay. So that was, I guess, from a principle perspective, my least favorite. But I guess favorite. I really like that one time, to bring up Chris again, that one time he had like made that little comment to me on Instagram, like, "Oh, I've barbell lateral toe tapped, over 300 pounds." Right. Do you remember that? And you and I were like, "Wait,
Yeah,
what?" And then you and I both wanted to see how much we could do. um, so, yeah, and I was able to do a set of 5 at 315. So that's 345-pound plates on each side. And so it was really eye-opening for me, like the specificity with like that single leg stability and that kind of mid stance running position and like this massive amount of weight on my back. Compare that to your clamshell and tell me which one prepares somebody better for the physical demands of running, right? But anyway, so I mean, that really was an eye opener. I was like, this is awesome. And so for folks who maybe don't know what a lateral toe tap is, I guess if you picture yourself standing, feet pretty narrow, stance, not together or anything, but maybe hip width or just slightly in, slight knee bend, just a slight knee bend, and then like a slight hip hinge. So just keeping your trunk straight and like just hinging forward from the hip a little bit. And so you're holding that position. And sometimes we'll start people off with a band around their knees and you're tapping out to the side. And so you're getting this single leg stability concept on the stance leg. And the leg that's tapping out to the side is tensioning the band, which is pulling your stance leg knee inward, which you then have to fight with your lateral hip muscles, your hip rotators and hip abductors. And then we can progress this by doing band plus a weight in like the goblet position, for example, like holding it under your chin, a kettlebell or a dumbbell. You could progress it by getting rid of the band completely and just holding something heavier. And then you could progress it even more by getting rid of the band, mainly for safety issues at this point, and holding a barbell on your back, which is with a good amount of weight, which is forcing your body to compress and you having to fight it in this position. And your knees, you're literally maintaining like a statue, every part of your body, except for this intermittent transition between single leg stance as you tap, coming back to center, and then redistributing your weight on both legs and then tapping out again, single leg stance. And so it is like an intermittent isometric exercise for that lateral hip, your glute med mainly. And so, yeah, anyway, that's probably one of my favorites.
Yeah, I think it's a great exercise to understand like where resistance is and what direction it's loading your body. So if you just start with a band and go heavier and heavier with the band, and then you take the band off and then you start with just weight in either goblet position or on the barbell or whatever, and go heavier and heavier and heavier with that. And it feels very different. It's loading different regions differently with that. And I think it's a great example to kind of understand that component of strength training.
Yeah, absolutely. So Adam, what are the most important areas or muscle groups to strengthen for a runner?
Yeah, my big three are the soleus, or really just the calf is usually what I lump it as, the quads, and then the lateral hip. And that would be in order of importance.
Yeah, and I think, did we mention the Dorn study last podcast?
I think we did mention it.
Yeah, so just
it's brief, but yeah.
Yeah, so basically, quick recap: they measured the peak forces of muscles during running. Unfortunately, the slowest pace they measured was like a 740 pace, and so we reference that the most because I guess it's the most applicable of the paces, since from there it just gets faster. It'd be great if they did another study where maybe they looked at more like 830 pace, 9, 10, maybe even like a 12-minute mile. And so, but typically the calf is producing, usually by far the most peak forces, and more specifically the soleus. They measure it in body weight equivalents. So like I'm like 145 pounds. So like one body weight equivalent is 145 pounds. And like soleus was producing 6 to 8 body weight equivalents, peak force. And then the quad being in second place, mainly 3 of the 4 quad muscles. But that was around 5 body weight equivalents or something like that. 3 to 5, something like that. Anyway,
yeah.
Lateral hip was 3.5. So glute med. So that is not glute max, right? There's glute med, glute max, and glute min. You can look up the anatomy to, a picture to see what the difference is, but glute max is the big, bubble butt muscle. And glute, they call it glute med and glute min, your side butt. It's like literally straight up the side of your pelvis bone. So anyway, yeah, calf quad lateral hip, and then right behind that being, if we were to add speed or hills into the mix, we really get hamstrings doing a lot more work. And yeah, I know, and you had mentioned last podcast, it's I'm remembering now, hip flexors
Yep.
as well as we pick up speed and stuff like that. So speed and hills. So yeah, with that said, if you're time crunched and you're looking for exercises to do to really hit the most important areas, get the most bang for your buck, the calf, the quad, and the lateral hip are going to be your regions you want to hit. So Adam, what are your favorite? What are some good exercises for the calf?
Yeah, so we already kind of mentioned we're a little limited just in its basic function, how we're going to stress or load the calf. So it's really got to be pretty much if we're looking at an isotonic exercise where we're going to go through that full range of motion, a standing heel raise or a seated heel raise. But I do also like to elevate the heel either in like a farmer carry, or sometimes I'll do it in a lateral toe tap as well, to get a really nice control kind of in that frontal plane or that left right movement of the ankle. Anything else that you do?
Yeah, no, there's just those tiptoe carries. Those are great. I've seen people do isometric kind of heel raise holds during lunges and stuff like that. But nothing's going to just straight up build capacity quite like just a heavy, isotonic up and down, nice and slow heel raise. So I guess there's the last consideration. So besides knee bend, which we'll get to for soleus emphasis reasons, the other thing being everybody thinks of the heel raise or heel drop exercise off of a step, right? So like increasing that excursion or range of motion by dropping below parallel. I do think that's important. If somebody has the ability to do that, it's not completely necessary. But if we do know that peak forces are usually produced just below parallel when the ankle is slightly dorsiflexed. So I think that preparing those tissues for that kind of position is important too. It's also just a really easy way to make things harder, because once somebody gets the intensity component understood, and they realize how hard these calf raises should be, sometimes they are limited by what they have access to in terms of holding things and carrying things. So one really easy way, which we also talked about last time, to make things harder without adding more weight would be to just slow things down or increase the range of motion. So doing a heel raise off of a step, dropping below parallel each rep, is going to make things harder with less weight than it would be to just do it on flat ground.
Yeah, for sure. There is something I was going to say about that, but now it's lost it's gone. So
let me know if it comes back. But yeah, so soleus emphasis, we can't skip this. So obviously a lot of people are doing.
I remember now.
Yeah,
it was about the soleus, but go ahead, because we'll get to it in a second here, I'm sure.
I see a lot of people doing straight leg heel raises, which is fine. And then people want to engage the soleus, so they just like do a heel raise with a knee that's slightly bent, like they're still standing and they do it with a bent knee. What are your thoughts on that?
It's not my favorite, because I think it's, first off, a lot of people, at least what I see on social media, demonstrate it's like their torso stays in the same spot.
Yeah, they're just bending
and their legs come up and down. So they're only going against the weight of their legs and not their whole body. So really the only piece of your body that should be moving is your ankle. Everything else is rigid. And so your whole body goes up and down.
Yeah, almost like if somebody had,
on this, as you're hearing this,
like if somebody had a ruler off, like, I don't know, hanging over their head, like I don't know, attached to the wall, something stupid or whatever. There was something right above your head. Like every rep, they should be taller to tap that. And then they should come down, you know what I mean? Like their whole body should be going up and down, but yeah, they're just doing like a knee hip thing.
And I think a lot of times the knee's not bent enough either to really bias towards that soleus.
Yep, that was my main thing I was thinking. So yeah, I mean, 90 to 100 degrees of knee flexion, right? It's typically what's required to get that soleus really emphasized. So I mean, Adam, what are your favorite ways to do that?
Well, I don't really like sitting in a squat that low for an extended period of time.
Yeah, that's
So I don't do that.
yeah.
Just sitting in a chair, either plates on the thigh, barbell with plates on there, really whatever you can get to sit on top of your thighs would be the best case scenario. But it's a hard one to load because you can produce a lot of force. So if you have access to like a seated heel raise machine, that's probably your best bet.
Yeah. And if you have a barbell, Adam and I don't know, it's definitely on my Instagram, but I don't know if you've put it on yours or whatever, but you'll see us around doing like a jerry rigged setup where we set up our bench so we have something to sit on, and then like a bumper plate that's 3 inches to have our, your forefoot on. So you can drop the heel below parallel. And then I have a barbell pad I put around my barbell. And then I'll basically just lift the barbell onto my knees, and my feet are on the bumper plate, and I'm doing heel raises with this padded barbell on my knees. So that's how I do it at home. For folks, most people have not most, I mean, a lot of people have like one kettlebell, or at least dumbbells up to 30-ish pounds or so. I mean, there's a fair amount of people that opens quite a few opportunities for a lot of people. So in that situation, let's say you have a 30-pound kettlebell, that's not enough weight probably. But another way that I like to share with people is if you put your foot up on a step or a chair or bench or something, and the heel hanging off the edge so it can go below parallel, and you put that kettlebell on the tip of your knee where it starts to get bony towards the edge, because that's where it's going to have the most leverage, and just put something padded underneath there so it's more comfortable. So they're standing up, their leg that they're going to work is up on something that they're going to be doing heel raises off of. And then they're holding this weight on their knee. That's not going to be enough weight. But if they lean into it and press down on their knee, it can kind of sometimes get a pretty deep, and they're keeping it slow and trying to get a lot of range of motion with it. They can usually get some decent fatigue in that soleus.
Yeah. What I've done in a clinic I was formerly at where we didn't have a ton of weight is use the backpack, and like you slide the straps of the pack through the leg, and then you load the weight in on the backpack, and so it's pulling down on you that way.
Yep, nice. That's a good idea. Sweet. Okay, what about quad?
Quads, I really like the step up, step down.
Yeah.
Especially when we go, like if we're really looking at quad emphasis, on that step down portion, having the foot out in front of the step and then coming back up. Hopefully that visually makes sense to people as they listen to this.
Yep, absolutely. I think a textbook Bulgarian is not super quad emphasized, but if you're able to, so a Bulgarian split squat is basically a lunge where your back leg is lifted on a bench or a chair or something. And usually, textbook Bulgarian, there's like a forward lean at, you squat down or lunge down, and there's a little bit of a trunk forward lean, and then you come back up, and it gets the glutes pretty good, and it gets some quad and stuff. But if you, in that position where you're standing in front of a bench, your foot is on the back, behind you on the bench, and then your front leg is ready to lunge. If you shift your weight forward onto that front leg, and then you just shoot your hips straight down and try and force your trunk to stay upright, you'll notice that like your knee will, go past your toes, which is fine. Your knee will go past your toes a little bit more. Just keep your heel down and do it that way. So a very upright Bulgarian split squat can be a pretty good quad exercise as well. So I typically like that one.
Yeah, that's a good consideration in terms of trunk position and what you're trying to bias, whether it's more hip oriented versus more kind of quad and knee. And, if we're going after that quad, we want that vertical torso.
Yep, absolutely. Whereas, I mean, from a rehab perspective, or for somebody else who just for whatever reason wants to make this their lateral hip exercise, you would just have them incorporate a little bit more of that, traditional trunk lean, and maybe have them hold their weight only in the contralateral or opposite side hand, right? And so the combination of those factors, this actually becomes then a pretty good glute med or lateral hip exercise, which is the next question for you, Adam. What are some of your favorite exercises for lateral hip, glute med?
Yeah, I'd have to say it's a little bit of a tie between a banded toe tap and a side plank, specifically with the foot raised there, the top leg raised up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that's really hard for folks, the top leg raised sometimes. So I made up, I probably was not the first person to make this up, but I realized that if you're doing a side plank and your feet are stacked on top of each other, and if you lift the top leg and you're like, oh, it's just way too hard instantly, which happens a lot. If you just take that top leg and lift just your heel and keep your toes touching together, it's like half as hard. So it's a good like intermediate. But I love side planks are good. The Bulgarian, modifications that we talked about are good. I love the toe taps, lateral toe taps. What was I going to say? Okay. So a couple weeks ago, I started doing single leg deadlifts again, pretty heavy. And I mean, you could make it like a really strict Romanian single leg deadlift and probably get more hamstrings than anything. But like, I was doing just a traditional single leg deadlift, and holy moly, like my lateral hip, my glute med, it was so sore. And it was like, holy, okay, this is good. I do think that one, I think it's good to have exercises that you're kind of like hitting two really important areas, right? If you want to hit hamstrings and lateral hip, then single leg deadlift is great for you. If you want to hit quadriceps and lateral hip, a Bulgarian split squat is great for you, right? Especially people who are time crunched like me, and we're trying to kind of like, combine just like to get the most efficacy out of an exercise. Yeah. So anyway, those are my thoughts there.
Yeah, perfect. I think that kind of leads us into, if we want to talk about kind of why we like these compound movements versus machines or isolated options, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. Well, not everybody has access to machines and ways to isolate muscles. So that's number one. So typically the compound functional, more functionally oriented kind of exercises or whatever you want to call them are more accessible, I think. But then usually they have more moving parts. So there may be more technique considerations. Like we're talking about, right? Your trunk lean affecting what muscle you're working. Like some people might be like, oh, I need somebody to look at my split squat, So yeah, I mean, it's nice sometimes to go to the gym and be like, oh my God, if I sit on this machine and do the thing the picture says, then it's going to hit the muscle that's highlighted in the picture, So, and that definitely, like, I think, we're both PTs. And so from a rehab perspective, there are certain things we're aiming for tissue adaptation, structural adaptation, where sometimes you're just not going to beat specifically and intensely loading that area with the most specific stress and allowing zero room for somebody to compensate away from that. But in terms of a general healthy runner strength training programming, I think that the compound exercises will get folks, or multi-joint exercises will get people more specific sport carryover and just overall efficacy.
Yeah,
Thoughts?
definitely. And I think it's just great to move your body in that manner and have that body awareness and be under load versus a machine where the movement is predicated based on what it allows. Like there's no variability from one rep to the next. And like you said, in like a rehab sense, when we're looking at something that's very specific to load, that's totally fine. But in terms of life, we need that variability.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I mentioned before that how much I love that heavy barbell lateral toe tap, because if you were to take a picture of me running in my mid stance of running and then compare that to my joint angles and like positioning that I'm in when I'm doing a toe tap, you'll see that they're very similar, right? And so you got to imagine that the strength I build in that exercise is going to translate directly to running, right? So if you're sitting on like a knee extension machine and just extending your knee through a range of motion, I mean, your quad will get stronger and you will use that strength while running, but how much specific carryover will there be? It's hard to say. So yeah, I think machines have their place, but I think that there's a lot better time spent elsewhere. If you don't have anything wrong that you're trying to address, you know?
Yeah.
Cool.
Is there anything else specific you want to cover here? I know we're starting to get kind of long and we like to try and keep these short and really
I know.
digestible.
I think that's the main stuff. I mean, I'm looking through a little checklist here. Oh, we didn't, real quick. I think we should talk briefly about core exercises.
Sure.
We can keep this quick, but Adam, what are your thoughts on the importance of, okay, I'll ask this two ways and give me brief answers because I'm going to ask them differently.
Okay.
How important is it that we have a strong core for running?
I mean, it's relatively important, but it's all secondary to what's below it in the legs.
Yeah, I think
And I
without
think it
defining
does
the
become
core
more
too, it's hard
important.
to.
I think it becomes more important the fast we're running.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that core is like this term that maybe doesn't have like a true definition, but I mean, I think most people think like the trunk muscles, your abs, and like supporting like spine musculature and like stuff like that. But what are, I guess now I'll ask, how important is it that runners specifically pick their exercises and train the core specifically for running?
I think it's pretty low priority.
Okay.
I don't do a lot of it. And, you know, I actually have a blog on this that I wrote, I don't know, it's probably several years ago now. And, you know, when we put weight on our back, we're doing a barbell back squat or even a deadlift or whatever. When we're moving weight, our core is engaged. It's not just like flopping around in the air. You know, it has to engage to maintain some rigidity of the spine so we don't just like crumble to the ground. So if you're doing some form of strength work, you're also inherently doing some core work.
Absolutely. Almost everything else that you're doing, especially if it's some of these compound exercises, your core is engaging. And there are studies that have looked at this. They've done like front plank versus back squat, and back squat wins. Like these studies are out there. And so somebody, you know, not too long ago was like, you don't do any core at all. Like, and you know, they're thinking like everything from sit-ups and back extensions to dead bugs and bird dogs. And quite frankly, I see that stuff all the time in strength programming. You know, we didn't get to it, but I had pulled up more of a serious recreational athlete who's being strength coached by somebody, his program. And then I used to do some strength coaching for an elite level female gal in the ultra running realm. And I have her old strength program from her previous strength coach. And I mean, the core stuff that people are programming is just insane. Like this either, you know, core stability stuff or like this burn your abs type stuff. Like it's just a waste of time. You're not even going to get abs from that. Like that's not how you get abs. So we don't have to go into that, but like what people are concerned about is being able to resist various torques that are put on their body from their limbs, moving them over ground at quick paces. And so that stability component, and what better way to make somebody hyper stable than to just put tons of weight on their back and have them squat, or to have them lift tons of weight off the ground. Like you literally have to stabilize your whole core for you to even be able to move that weight an inch. And even something like a single leg deadlift, not like the other place that I was very surprised, because it had been a while since I'd done some heavy single leg deadlifts, was my low back on one side, like the opposite side to that I was working. Or yeah, you know what I mean? My low back on one side was significantly fatigued. So like my core is like my whole low back wrapping around my side, like that was just getting worked. And so anyway, anybody who's back squatted or deadlifted heavy knows this already probably, or at least has felt it, but there is data to support it as well. So if you're lifting heavy, you don't need to do core, or in general, you probably don't need to do specific core exercises.
Yeah, perfect. Just keep
I
it
would
simple.
say,
Don't overthink
you know
it.
how like clamshells have their place in a certain time and everything has their place in a certain time. And I do think that like dead bugs and bird dogs can potentially have their place, but like you don't, even in that place, I don't think that those are the best exercises. I think graded exposure, reduced versions of these functional compound movements are sometimes better. But anyway, I can go on and on, but yeah, if that helps any of you save some time, no need to do your bicycle kicks or dead bugs or bird dogs or planks or anything like that anymore. So if you like doing them, great, but you don't have to be doing them.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll save some of the rest. Maybe they'll come in with questions. We didn't hit like unstable surfaces training and upper body.
The upper body. Yeah.
But I'm sure we'll get questions about those for the next episode. So yeah. Anything else, Adam?
That's all I got.
Cool. Okay, guys. Well, ask us some questions. Use the link in the show notes. And yeah, you can reach out to us, Facebook Messenger, Instagram, email, or whatever. All of that information's in the show notes. And yeah, that's it. So go make some strides.
Yeah, make some strides.
Lift some
See
weights.
you next time.
Okay, see you guys.